Oh my God, you can see. There it is. This works a little bit better. This is again. That's right. She's right there. No, I haven't poured any yet. Oh, you're so sweet, babe.
Hello.
Hi.
I wanted to ask you, how do I pay you? Do you have Cash
Oh,
App?
excuse me?
Do you have Cash App?
Let me raise the volume just a little bit. I'm sorry, Mike.
Oh, no, you're fine.
I do. I can send you the little thing, and then you can just send it over.
Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't worried. I thought we would, discuss it right now. I probably should be a little bit better about it. But, with the pandemic, most of the time people would come into the office, and sometimes I'd work from home, but now it's just going to be home. So I was looking at your scores, and I will bring them up right now. And I looked at, what I saw was student instruction or instructional planning was one of the lower scoring areas.
Yeah, and I think I teach life skills, so everything that I do in the class is totally different. So I guess I have to get out that mindset.
No. And you really don't. You just have to tweak it a little bit, because that mindset is good for the special ed questions that are there inside of the exam. Why is this? This is a different email. I'm like, I do not see you.
Yes, I email you from work email.
Me too. So I'm going over to my work email. Okay, so, and that's that you can't see my screen yet, can you? Let me see. Alrighty, so now you can see what I'm doing, because before you couldn't.
Okay.
To like remind myself how to do that. So most people have the most trouble with the two highly tested areas, the domains that are most tested, and those are with planning and instruction. So what do you know of your students? What do you know of their human growth? Where are they in their human growth as far as what we know of human theory, whether it's learning theory or actual like physiology theory, of whether if they're special ed or not, and what sort of deviations from normal instruction you might make in order to accommodate, some of those things that you would have to notice, and especially at those elementary years. And that's the thing about, I don't know at what level you teach life skills. Is that the high school?
Yes, high school.
Okay, so I've been in some amazing life skills class. The one most notable that I remember was in Austin, Texas, and at an IDEA campus, and they had the life skills class, their largest project, which sort of like every lesson was sort of like based into them successfully running a campus coffee shop for the teachers on certain days. I don't know if that's something that you guys do or that you've heard of, but I had never seen it, and it was amazing because as we'll discuss later about the different types of curriculums that are available, traditionally Texas doesn't see a real super like varied, it's typically direct instruction. We say we want a whole bunch of like student engagement or whatever, but teachers really haven't been taught how to facilitate that properly, and sometimes it's harder, gets out of hand. Might be a little bit more, it does take a little bit more planning. And so just getting that mindset that in the end, once you train them in the beginning with good classroom management, good practicing and modeling, that those tasks that we want them to do are really not that daunting. we just want them to get together and talk about it amongst themselves, but we sort of have to train them from early on. But I digress. What we'll do is we will take a look at one of the forms that I have that I've gotten from my students. And I've had students all through Texas. On different campuses, and on prisons, like juvenile prison detention centers, to Christian schools, to like one room, literal one room, like schools, like elementary through high school, and the principal is the teacher and the principal and the superintendent.
Oh, wow.
Great stuff that I didn't even think existed in Texas, but there are so many districts we just don't even know. And some of them don't have the resources and the access to like different cultures, which is why it's important that teachers make that sort of very conscious decision, no matter where you are. You can be urban city, South Texas, where I am, where there's like 98 population Hispanics. Like, we have got to do the job to get them to know what else is out there, because that's where we want them to go, out there and do well.
Yeah.
So a lot has to go into being a really mindful and effective teacher. And that's really what the exam is about. It is mostly a critical reading exam, so you have to pay attention to the words. They use sort of like buzzwords, and if you're an English teacher, you can sort of pay attention to it easier, because that's how we look for nuanced reasons for why an author might have a purpose, you know, like, oh, they did this from this way because of this particular word that they use, which is usually leads to this. And so that's how this exam. So you have to be a very critical reader. They will throw out particular words that are buzzwords, but they're pedagogical terms. And so when we see them, we should know, okay, this is what they're talking about. If they're talking about, and I'll pull up the sheet right now so that we can take a look at some of the things that I'm talking about. And we'll do the domains that you have most difficulties right now, and then we'll sort of like brush over the other two.
Okay.
Domain 2, 1 and 3 are the most important. Domain 2, they're all important, but I mean, they're the most important for the exam because they're the most heavily tested.
Gotcha.
So it's all important. Domain 2 is really important. It's about building relationships. It's about creating that campus culture, creating that consciousness of other cultures in your classroom, making everybody feel safe, making everybody feel heard, making sure bullying is not a thing. And so it's setting up your routines, and then building the relationship between your students so that you can foster the perfect environment where they're safe and happy, so that they can do the things that they need to do for you and achieve those goals. And then domain 4 is like all of the legal stuff. How fast do you need to call CPS if they say, my parents beat me, you know? How long do you wait until somebody says, my parents beat you? Do you say, well, like, how bad?
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean by do they beat you? Like a spanking, or do you just take them on their word and just go at beating? It's up to you. If somebody gets called to CPS at the house and it's just like, he threw a rock at the TV and it shattered and you got a spanking. So like, Texas law is parents can spank their children for discipline. Like, we don't want them running all willy-nilly within reason. Like, they have the back and food, then you need to call immediately. You have 48 hours before you lose your license. And I don't even think you should wait that long. If you had made an outcry to me, then in there I would say, you're gonna wait with me here. I'm gonna call someone. You're not even gonna go home. Like, I'm not even gonna let you go home.
Yeah.
Talk to somebody, you know? So, but that's me. And I've taken in a foster student whose mom was beating her and whose dad was like really weird and a drunk and sort of like inappropriately sexual. So I have been there. I've been in the classroom in some of the lowest economic, you know, parts of our community, of all of the communities that I've worked in. So I've seen a lot of things, and I understand that it's not a perfect world that we work in. We have to do the best with what we're given. But for the purposes of this test, it's like in theory, you know what I mean? In the perfect theory, this is what could happen. We know that there are extenuating circumstances on your campus with your children day to day, you know, that you have to. but like that framework of where you should be working from. This is what should be happening in our classroom. If it can't happen because I can't make it happen, who do I need to talk to make it happen? I'll give you a quick example. I had a kindergarten student, not kindergarten student, kindergarten teacher, and she was teaching a dual language program. And so it was half in Spanish. They were all Spanish speakers. None of them spoke English. I think maybe they had a couple of English speakers that spoke some Spanish, but it wasn't a true, like what the program's supposed to look like. And they are supposed to have carpets for reading time, because that's like a thing. Everybody go to the carpets for activities. Need the carpets. They're going to be napping. The carpets are necessary. So she was first year teacher, you know, straight out of college, came to the EPP I was currently working at, and I was there and I said, "Where's your carpet for the kids?" She's like, "Oh, we don't have any more." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Well, they ran out, and then we were supposed to get one from I don't know where, but I'm not sure." And then so like, it's just unacceptable. This is a campus in Texas, in Austin. You know, I know they get funds. Every classroom should have a carpet for the kids to go to and read, take their nap times, do their centers, whatever the case may be. So I suggested that she call around, and I think in October, she started the year in August. In October, she got her what she needed in order to make her classroom work. That shouldn't happen in theory. For the purposes of the exam, if the answer was wait until October till you get it, would be no. You would be like in there every day telling people, "Listen, Manuel, he likes to thrash around and he's all thrashing on the bare concrete that we have there. It's cold there. You know, can we do something?" Every day. And you wouldn't be out of place.
Right.
Your principal, but you definitely wouldn't be, you would be doing your job. Because your job is not to make, not wholly to make your principal's job easier. It is, but your job is to the students, every child that walks through that door. And you are the best person to know if they're okay or not. Teachers see students so much longer than parents do, because they work, and then the parents get home and they're tired, and do your homework by yourself. Let me go do the things I need to do to make stuff running in the house. Not for nothing, not because they don't want to be great parents, but because we're all just trying to live in the world we live in. So how best do we support our kids knowing what we know? And it's actually not that difficult. We know the way that human development is. We know what works with kids. We know that if you bully them and say, "Man, if you had studied harder, you wouldn't look so dumb on your exam," like that would never make somebody do better, you know? And it's incredibly emotionally damaging. You'd be surprised though how many people need to be told not to bully the students. That even though they're little, they remember. And teachers are like, it's kind of like the way we look at a doctor. I go in there and I look at my doctor like he knows everything. He really doesn't. He's just a dude that went to medical school. But I'm like, yes, take this. Same way the students look, and also parents, especially low economic, socioeconomic levels. You're going to have the parents that aren't going to ask questions. And so a lot of times it literally is us asking the questions like, this doesn't seem right.
Right. And that's, I work in a low economical area. I work in Cleveland, Texas. So I worked in Pasadena, which is population Hispanic as well. And then I came to Cleveland, but it's just a total culture shock there. Like, it's different. And in Pasadena, my parents were involved. They're really, you know, here, nothing, you know, even now with remote learning.
It is different, because with my children, and I am by no means wealthy in any way, shape, or form by any stretch of the imagination. However, I invested in being a teacher and using all my spare time, making them the type, you know, the students that I want to see in the classroom, and they go and they, you know, want learning and wants for the teacher to answer their questions and not to just give a handout and not give instruction. They're like, "Wait a minute. We don't know how to do this. Were we going to learn to do this?"
Yeah.
So handouts wouldn't work with my kids, and they would come and tell me, "My algebra teacher just gives handouts, and nobody knows what they're doing." I'm like, "That's not going to work." And I don't want to step on toes, but I am going to be a parent that is going to make sure everybody, not just my kid,
Yeah.
Everyone in the classroom is getting what they need to succeed. And if you are handing out worksheets for algebra with no instruction, you are setting them up for failure. Point blank, period. I don't care how smart
Yeah.
you are. Or you're gonna get a lot of extra work for the parents. But you know, Pasadena and Cleveland, in Pasadena, the parents would have gone in and said, excuse me, algebra is important for math, you know?
Yeah.
Strong in the foundation. What are you doing that you're wanting to have these things? So, and you get, it's all over. Nobody does it perfectly. We just all have to try to do it better. No one does it perfect.
Yeah.
We every day have to try to do it better. Me, if I see somebody else, even if they're my friend, you know, you have teacher friends and they do things differently. I'll be like, you know, that's not cool. And because once we turn the tide, then everyone's going to be like, man, and I feel like get more invigorated. So I'm going to get off my soapbox and bring out the form, which, like I said, one of my students gave it to me a long time ago. And she is, I think now like a 6-year teacher, veteran. You know how they say veteran teacher? I don't like how they say that. It's so rude to those teachers that put a lot of effort to learn about pedagogy and know their craft, and, you know, might not be so wet behind the ears and do have things that are worthy of listening to and thinking about. I'm not saying make them the principal. I'm just saying, let's not call them, you know, I hear pet about things all the time. Okay, so let me see where I can rubric. So what kind of questions were they asking on this? I've never seen.
So I have the review. I don't know. I'll go over, I'll find one that
I can share the screen with you if you'd like. I'm just looking for that thing here. What's the lesson plans? Oh, here it is.
So I can show you one that I missed. I can't send it, and I'm on a phone, so I don't think I can pull it up.
Oh, it's not a big deal. We'll just take a look at this, and if you think sort of like rings a bell that they asked a question in your review, say like, yeah, they said something about that. Like, what is this scenario? Because the state, you work on a campus, a Texas campus, so you know what testing on the state level on campus is like. About signing your life, I swear, under perjury, I will go to jail if I look at these papers too long. I mean, they're really serious about that. They spend a lot of money crafting them to be tricky. So they don't want anyone knowing them unless they have released it themselves. Now, the state did release some questions a lot of years ago, and they just took them off and they put up a shortened, less whatever, because they want people to spend more money getting stuff from them to prepare to take the test, which is also, you know, now run by them. So my point is that we don't know what they're asking until they release questions. So we really have to go, like tutors that try to help professionals, you know, we have to go by what our students tell us. Like, well, I heard there was a question about particular hardware, like technology hardware, and I was unsure as to what that had to do with anything. So we sort of get to know what the changes are before the changes are actually announced to us through just asking students and their attempts. Because at the other place that I was working at, I had students that were already teachers and they were at different levels, so some of them had already taken it and had been unsuccessful. Okay, so I'm going to send this to you along with anything else that we take a look at today.
Okay.
So, Piaget's theory of cognitive development. How does our brain work at different stages of our growth and development, and what does that say towards instruction? Would I give a pre-operational student the same vocabulary and sort of like problems to solve that I would a formal operational student? And if I did, what should I expect to see? What would you see if and you can take a look, I don't know if you can see the highlight here. Oh no, it just highlights the whole thing, never mind. The concrete operational, here you have 7 to 11 years. So that's like sort of the later elementary, early middle school. So I would say, yeah, middle school. And then junior high, I would consider more like 7, 8. It's all the same, you know, middle school is 6 through 8. But in these years, they're beginning to think.
I only can see the 240, the practice score.
Oh no, why? Okay, let me close this and make it small and share this. No, okay, hold on, let me. I just do like I just want to do I see, because I did just that page and I just want to do the desktop. I think this is better.
Okay.
Can you
yes,
see
I can
pedagogy
see.
and
Yes.
responsibility?
Yes.
So let me tell you the story of this. Like I have a master's in English and a master's in communication, and one of the things that I so dislike is people not, you know, like not paying dues and sort of respect for copyright. If you wrote something, if you came up with some sort of intellectual property, like you should not use that unless you've asked for it or you paid for it. And so I used to hate sending this out like this, but they don't make it anymore. I contacted the Notes company to see if I could pre-purchase, because I remember these from when I was in college. You could buy them for biology, and they were like sort of laminated or made out of some sort of plastic, and you got them at the bookstore. Well, Texas stopped this company from making this for their students. So and that's why this copy looks so ridiculous. And it some other stuff. So when I send this to you, I will type out just like some changes to make sure that I will discuss here, but that I want you to make sure that you note on there, because they're like old school teaching. Like we've learned how to do things better. And so it's different on here because this is like circa 1990s maybe, or early 2000s. Yeah. So the last copy that hard copy was in 2007. So that's how long Texas wants to keep this. It's like not even rocket science. I don't know what.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm going to send it to you.
Okay.
So we have these typical stages. And when we talk about cognitive development, we talk about their idea to think about ideas. And so when you're a baby, you're very, like, you only think about yourself. Like, I think of them as little narcissists. And I have 5 kids, and my 15-year-old, when my 2 youngest were little, they're a little bit, they'll say our mom, or like, but they used to just say my mom. Well, my mom said this, and Zoe would say, well, it's my mom too. But they were at that stage where they were like very me-centered, can't see outside themselves, always perspective, and that takes cognitive ability. So when they're at 0 to 2, they really don't have that me, mine, concrete, what's in my hand. If you take it away, then it doesn't exist. That's why the whole hiding or removing the chupons, the chuppies, the pacifiers from the song works, because sort of out of sight, out of mind. Their minds aren't that complex yet, you know? They're growing and making all those connections, those synapses. We have to give them myriad opportunities to experiment, start building those connections. And what we're really doing is we're building their prior knowledge. And the more a student has prior knowledge, more experiences, and it's hard because they're at home at this time. And even daycares are not equipped really to do the things that they need to do to prepare them from when they go to school. And then they get there and they're like, do algebra, or like I've seen some in elementary. But let's just say that you have a concrete operational class, and you are beginning at this stage. At 7 years old, you are only beginning to think of others' viewpoints in a way that is going to be meaningful for your actions, that where you would like change or things differently. Apply logical thought to concrete and begin to start abstract thinking. Now that last part, that abstract thinking, where they can take something that they knew and understand, sort of take it apart, rearrange it into something new, which still works for the same thing, that's very, very complex. And someone in 2nd grade, because I believe that's 7 years old, is not going to do that. But you have a lot, and it seems like you wouldn't have to say that, but I promise you there are teachers, all sorts of teachers, people who leave banking, they were like hardcore stock market person, they're really good at math, and they come in and they want to teach 2nd grade elementary, you know, they're going to change careers and retire, and they're brilliant mathematicians, but their kids' minds are not there yet.
Yeah.
yes, they know the material, and yes, but they have to make a change in their planning for the people that are sitting in front of them. You know, they're no longer hard. You can pretend you're at Harvard, but if you're not at Harvard, that's not going to work. So, and that's not to say to dumb it down. You should always have your students reach. But what I mean is that, for instance, if I'm going to read in life skills, I'm going to read about gardening, or why maybe it would be a good hobby, right? That you can keep the flowers and they look pretty, that's nice to do, or you can grow some vegetables, right? People grow fruits and vegetables, and then you could segue into science. That article may or may not have scientific terms that a life skills student will not know. And do not do a short mini instruction on vocabulary, pronunciation. If you before you read a story, choose out 4 words that you think are going to give them trouble and make them confident before they read it, whether it's life skills or whether it's AP English. Nobody likes to feel like they don't know what is being said, or like they're confused, or like they're dumb. They just so we know what might give them difficulties, and that's where learning, being able to anticipate their errors. And a lot of times in the PPR exam, they might ask about you being able to anticipate student errors. And the reason that you want to do that is so that you can plan for them and make sure that it doesn't happen. And one of the best ways you could do that is by making sure that you teach that key content vocabulary. And that's across the board. That's for math, that's for science, that's for social studies. And so this PPR exam is EC, which is early child, 0 to 2, because we do somewhere, not here, have programs that they have like a lot of smaller kids. I know in San Antonio, I had never seen this before. Very poor school again, but it was a 3 and 4-year-old campus or a 4 and 5-year-old campus, I'm not sure. It escapes me now. The point is that one of the students was not potty trained, and would just like, this wasn't a special, it was just like a life skills thing. It was just the mom hadn't potty trained him yet, and in the classroom he would just like poop in there, like a big 5-year-old poop in the classroom. So I don't know where I was going with that. You have all levels of ages, and this test is going to test your knowledge on EC, early child, and all the way to 12th grade. And it's going to do it through every lens of content area that we have, just to switch it up on you. Because you have math questions, but they're not math questions. They never are math questions. It is always going to be about, and I want you to tell yourself this, if you see a different content and you're like, eesh, that's not my content, I'm not good at science or whatever it is that you think, that everybody has one thing that they think they're not good at. So saying, oh, this might be challenging. It isn't. It's not about the content. It's about the instruction. Is there an instructional strategy? Did they give me an age group that I need to pay particular attention to, so that I can see where are they in their mind development? Where are they cognitively? Are they able to deduce reasoning, inductive reasoning, deductive reasoning, physical maturation? Like, and this is important because you need to be able to see, is this normal for my student to be exhibiting? Is it normal for a 5-year-old to sleep through all his activities? No, it's not. He should be sleeping at like nighttime. It is not normal. So like, and if you look at it, 3 to 4 years, they're high energy. Like, I couldn't get mine to go to sleep. I get them to go to sleep. They're here, and I had to throw them out of my area. And my 4-year-old said, "You really hurt my feelings," because I told her she couldn't be here. I said, "I'm working." She's like, "But you're home." I'm like, "I know it's go away." Now I explained it to her better, but she was a little sad. She doesn't understand I'm not trying to be mean. I have to do things, but that's what I'm talking about. You got to explain things in such a way that you are able to be impactful with your audience. And so a lot of times teachers are like, I don't need to pay attention to the audience. This is just like the lesson that's always given. This is what they do every year on this day. And so who cares about the audience? Well, that's not going to work. It may work with kids who can teach themselves in a classroom without a teacher. My kids can. I don't want them to, because I feel like they get more out of having conversations with other kids and other
Mm-hmm.
viewpoints, but they literally can. My daughter has. So it's just putting in that effort to know your kids makes all the difference. And not only should we be doing it, it literally is in our job. Like, it's written in the rules and all of the standards for PPR for us to know about them, what their home life is like, get in contact with their parents, be cognitive changes, all those things. Okay, so here we go. So other things to think of is the way that kids see themselves, and then I'm so sorry that this like feels really bright. The way that kids feel about themselves matters in the classroom. And so you might be in a junior high class, and the girls are not, you know, wanting to go into their group, and it might be something about being embarrassed about being in a thing with boys, and just silly
Mm-hmm.
stuff, but things that we need to think about, you know, the way that boys and girls typically, not typically, but, you know, traditionally behave. We need to look out for low self-esteem, not just for girls, but for boys as well.
Mm-hmm.
For self-image, because if you don't feel good about yourself, you're not going to push yourself to be better. You
Mm-hmm.
feel badly about yourself, you're like, I'm just here. And we have to always be that person, even if they're awful, and they can be hard, thinking, oh my god, this is awful, why did I do this? But I did it for them, you know. And I've never had a student, never, and the one time I thought, man, he just doesn't like me, I didn't reach this one. He is an adult now, and like, it's all, you were so great, blah blah blah. I just thought in my head, because he still had his outbursts, which had nothing to do with me. They had to do with, you know, he was experiencing some really pretty serious things at home. So every student can learn. We can make a connection. You can find one thing that you guys can agree on and make a connection with, even the ones that are difficult. So being that rock for the students to come to you, and for you to be able to sort of see if there's any changes. Erickson's sociological or physiological development, like the way that they think about themselves, are physical needs met. Here they can initiate activities and play at like 3 to 6 years old. You'll see, like, at that daycare age. But if they're 1 or 2, unless they're really outgoing, they're going to be sort of like next to the people who they really know, like their mom, their dad, their uncle. And then, so you might see that behavior in an older child and think, what is going on here? They're like really withdrawn and not really behaving in that sort of way. And just to know that obviously the teenage years, which apparently start at 6 now, or did in the 90s, the 18, we need to make sure that we give them industry, and that means that they're able to feel like they can do things for themselves, like capable. Like, I just taught my 4 and 5-year-olds and my husband's 5-year-olds, so 2 5-year-olds and 4-year-olds, how to I have like a little teapot thing. I fill up the humidifier thing that puts out the scents. It's so silly. There's like 3 steps to it. You have to pay attention to the line, make sure you don't put a whole bunch, and they loved it. And it's like their favorite thing to do, and we taught 1 at a time. And so they're 4 and 5, but the fact that they can do that task, they're like, Mom, if it's not on, do you want for me to refill the smelly things? And I'm like, you can. And I'll stand there and I watch them. But that success, that industry, that ability for them to, gives them confidence for later. Right now, my 15-year-old daughter is exhibiting far too much confidence, and I'm really like rethinking my parenting choices. I'm like, you are far too independent. I am not liking this, but I made it that way, so I'm trying to like roll with the punches. Okay. Moral development. Most kids sort of know what's right and wrong, right? But at that early age, you really do sometimes have to teach right and wrong, especially when they don't get that modeling at home, you know? I have found that when children exhibit like really hitting other students, if they exhibit that in elementary, it has been my experience that they're either seeing someone exhibit that violence or they are the target of that violence from So just sort of knowing that, like, most kids would know what the limit is, but that also we have to, you know, reinforce what goes on at home. And I have a lot of teacher friends, and I get on the high horse. They're like, I mean, I know we don't get paid as much as we should, but we shouldn't have to do with the parents, but it's all part of what we're doing. We're not just teaching them the academics, we're teaching them how to learn. We're teaching them how to resolve conflict. Sometimes when we give them a task and it's too hard, I'll go back to the example I gave you earlier of the student in second grade as opposed to the student in put it at junior year. If you gave them the same sort of task, even if you changed the wording because you thought they might understand better, but the ideas were more abstract, more complex, higher order thinking skills, and you gave it to a group of second graders, however smart they were, what you might do is just frustrate them, make them feel inferior, without proper instruction, without being in their ability, their cognitive ability. That is not to say once they reach that age that they won't be able to, like this, do that. You probably will, but not right now. And what you're going to do is cause frustration. So whenever we see anger or like upsettedness in the classroom, it typically stems from frustration. They're feeling inferior, they're feeling like they can't do it, and something has to be done in order to make a change because they don't, even though they're like, oh, can we have the answers, they really don't want the answers at the end of the day. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is important, and I learned this my very first year of teaching with an used to call them ACP programs, alternative, and it was like this really toxic label that they gave us, and now they're calling it preparation programs. We don't use the alternative preparation programs. It's not alternative, we do just as much. But anyway, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. A child cannot achieve self-actualization under assault. They cannot perform at the level that they need to without food, water, shelter, basic stuff. And if they basically have that at a homeless shelter, they're not going to be performing where you need them, and it is not their fault. So just knowing to be able to, like, say, man, Mila's been wearing that outfit a whole bunch, and some of the kids were complaining that she smells. Is anything going on? And there's a way to have tact. You don't have to say, I saw Sheila, blah, blah, blah. And you know, what you want to do is build a relationship with the parent and child and tell them, first and foremost, on your first day that you have parent-teacher, my success depends on how successful your children are, point blank, period. I am going to do whatever it takes to help you. And I hope you're on my team, because we'll be an awesome team, and your child's going to do awesome. And then just keep up that positivity, because anything's possible. And you will hit road bumps. It won't be like roses and cherries, but nothing is. You know, our job is hard because it deals with human capital. And if we don't do a good job, we will end up with Donald Trump's son or some other person. Like, please, we must do better.
Right.
I'm just saying. Anyway, moving on to the next one, we have diversity. Very important. I love how it was a very small little box back then. So important for us to pay attention to it. Teachers have to, and I love the whole, this is very 90s lingo. I'll let you read it on your own. I don't want to do that. But educational equity, right? We have been fighting for it forever. Here in Texas, you know, there's been Supreme Court decisions because Texas still likes to make little brown and black kids feel some type of way about schooling and provide them with less stuff. So fairness culturally at your district level, fairness in seating, fairness in wait time, which is so important, and we'll circle back to it again, but I like to repeat it often. Wait time is so important. It does wonders for getting kids to think about things longer and give them a little bit of time to build up confidence to give a better answer than they normally would, instead of like one answer, one word response. Paying attention to their verbal cues, and then also paying attention to your own. I didn't realize how closely the kids watched me. My second year teaching, I came in, I had forgotten my coffee. I always drink a lot of coffee in the mornings, and so a little bit like less chipper. And I don't know what I did, but I put it down in like I guess it was like an aggressive manner. I didn't think that it was like a book or something. And they're like, "What's wrong, Miss Salceda?" And I was like, "Why?" They're like, "Did something happen?" I'm like, "I forgot my coffee." They're like, "We knew it. You're like just a little, something was off." But they noticed my energy too. So I have to be really like cognizant about that. Praising them when you have opportunities to praise. If they only gave you, like, I've had some kids, but like if they came in and sat down and didn't bother anyone, I was like, "You did amazing today. Tomorrow you're gonna come sit down, you're not gonna bother anybody, and you're gonna write your name on the paper. It's gonna be awesome." Like baby stuff. Because first of all, he had an IEP, but secondly, I remember an older teacher saying, "Why do you praise him? Like he just came in and sit down. Like it's not a big deal."
Yeah.
Listen, I'm trying to build something here, and it wasn't built overnight. So, just giving every opportunity, even if you think it's silly. I do it all the time to everybody I know. I'm constantly giving compliments. If I like somebody's shirt, I will stop and be like, "I love your shirt. That color looks beautiful on you." But just because I feel like people don't do it enough, we don't have enough kindness, and there's just so much ugliness everywhere. So especially for our kids, I want to make it a place where they like coming to Miss Salceda's house. They just feel class. Oh my God. Encourage your students to interact. Don't just encourage. You will make, carefully craft your small group instruction so that you pull from different diversities, different socioeconomics. If a teacher is today in 2020, well, everybody's on lockdown, so that's not a thing, but in 2019, when we used to have schools back in the day, you let your kids choose their friends to go work. I know you think it's better because they'll have more fun, but you are really doing a disservice to them, because you don't get to go think up problems and do hard things with your friends. You don't. You have to work with people you may or may not like, or you may or may not understand, and you need to begin at age 0 learning those skills, and they take practice. So not just encouraging them to interact, forcing them to interact, making your groups colorful, making your groups of different socioeconomic, boy, girl, gay, straight. I mean, we have different categories of students that who experience difficulties, bullying, and hate because of lack of interaction with other cultures. So it is our job, and if you don't have them in your class, because I've been to some one-room school rooms, you bring in movies and pictures and guest speakers, and you do what you can to make sure you fulfill that responsibility. It is not okay. You can't say to me like, "Oh, well, we only have brown people in this town, and there's like 98% Mexicans." We really don't need to read about or have someone from China, or it's unnecessary, and it's lazy on the part of any district not to I'm talking about on a district level, but if they're not doing something for you, you can do it in your classroom. And in fact, it's actually one of your standards for one of your state standards. Just make those connections and get people who can be good mentors, and bring them and introduce them to sort of motivate your students to do better. If I work in the Valley, and my stepson is Black, and he experiences bullying amongst my people, he is the same junior high as my son, who in the Mexican culture is güero, which means he looks white. And I will have words with somebody if they look a little bit less tan than I want to. But it was crazy to me that here in the Valley, they've done such a poor job teaching my culture, my students, my people to be better.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very disappointed, and I'll be talking to all sorts of principals all over the place here, and I'm going to post this portion here so they can hear it. But we all can do better, and we must do better. And that means if your kids they haven't seen a lot of Black people, then you need to find a motivational speaker, somebody, bring them in to talk. If you don't have, you have one in your group. If you you take them, you have a conversation, because I don't know, I feel like people don't want to be the whistleblower on their own people, but we have to be used to the students in the class, period. So making sure that we are teaching them, giving them access to technology. This is a big deal. You cannot assign something that can only be done online if you haven't given them a time period during the school day to do it and access to something to complete it. Or you know for a fact that it's at home, like you are in this rich district and there's an initiative that's BYOD, bring your own device, okay? That's not where I live. That would never be a thing because nobody has a device here. There's like 10, so depending on where you are, but always trying to advocate it and make sure that you're giving them every opportunity. If there's only one community computer lab, then you go in there and you write their name down as much as possible and say, well, I'm sorry, we wrote it down. Like, you're going to go in there and do this and this and this. So student motivation, that's hard because you have those factors that are on the outside that we were talking about, these needs, and if they're not getting them, then their motivation and their self-esteem are going to affect their ability to be successful in their academics. So one of the ways is allowing them to have some sort of industry, some sort of choice. So this works also for when you're doing classroom management, talking to them. And I always spent like at least a week, and I had some principals that didn't like it, and I really don't care because I'm more of like a scholar type educator. So I'm like, I'm doing what's best for the kids. As long as I don't break any rules, I'm cool. And I can But so we would talk about, themselves. I would get to know them. I would learn everyone's name by the first or their second day. And I always talked about our goals, because the district told me during those sessions that I had to sit through what their goals were as far as like testing and everything else, dropout rate, blah, blah, blah. So I know what my goals are supposed to be. I know what their goals are supposed to be. We talk about what is the best environment in order to achieve those things for you guys to not only achieve them, but have fun. I don't want to be bored either. I want to have fun. I always while I'm learning. So how can we do that and just sort of get them talking about it? Now, obviously you wouldn't do that with a kindergarten class. You have rules. You can stand up. You're teaching them to be a person at that age, but at some point they should be people already, come to you as human beings, and where you would have a discussion and they could say to you, well, maybe like one person talking at a time, because if everybody talks, we can't hear each other. That's excellent. Yes, I definitely think one person at a time. So making them feel, and they will be less likely to break rules. They will be more likely to say, dude, why are you doing that? Like, we all agreed we weren't going to do that. You said we weren't going to do that in the beginning of the year, and sort of police themselves because they have ownership in it. It was something they did. Likewise, if I'm doing something like research-based, I mean, obviously I'll try to focus it towards where I want them to go, but I am going to let them choose. I'm not going to assign a person who you don't know, some white dude, like, no, or, some other person that you don't know. I'm going to say, okay, this is what you're supposed to choose. So someone who overcame obstacles and did, give them framework with which to choose. And if they want to choose Thomas Jefferson, then so be it. I mean, but if they chose it, it was, I remember what I chose. I chose Harriet Tubman, not because I knew who she was, but because my teacher, which you could do this before the internet, went to the library. She took out like really short autobiographical books not autobiographical, biographical books, excuse me, autobiographical, but really short ones. And she put them on the table, and we just sort of like looked through them. And if someone likes the picture, or I'm a reader, I read like crazy. So I was reading it, and like, they did what to her? She did what? Like, while I was there, I read just very quickly that her owner dropped a 20-pound weight on her head. And even after that, she was able to go and do all these amazing things and save all these people. So I was like, done. This is what I'm doing. And I have been a lifelong advocate. I mean, my kids do read a book of hers and do a project. But my point is that I was excited that whole time to do that project. I was excited to tell other people what I learned, but I chose it myself. And that's why I was excited. And so the easiest excited with candy, because that is obviously illegal. You can't give them sweets because they might have allergies or like diabetic, and we're not supposed to give them nutrition stuff. But also they get that like sugar rush, and it's sort of like the opposite of what you want. But I will say, in some of the poor schools, they need to give out snacks. Snacks need to be given, and I would keep like some lunches and stuff for them to eat. But I'm talking about like candies and stuff, like, oh yeah, we'll get a Snickers if they're quiet for the sub. Like, no, don't do that.
Yeah.
Them, you expect that when anyone comes into your classroom, whether it's a sub or their janitor or whomever, you don't know, you don't care, you're going to treat them like Miss Elsada, because when she comes back, that's what she wants to hear. So that's how you do it, to sort of like build that student motivation in a way that's positive and not negative. It takes more time, it takes more energy, but it's totally worth it. Very quickly, the learning styles that, you know, they're everybody's interested in a different way. We're interested in a different way. You can look around at one of your sessions on campus, and if it's interesting to some people or pertains to them, they might be taking notes, you know, and if not, like texting someone, or they went to the coffee machine to make their 8th glass of coffee. You know? It depends. If you're being boring, and that's what I'm saying, no matter what you're doing, if your audience is not interested or listening to what you are saying, they are not learning. And if I'm an administrator and I go into your classroom and everybody has a worksheet and no one is talking or engaging, like, I'm going to be worried, because there should be a discussion, and there are some places for handouts, but I don't like to see that. I want to see very, very little, and if so, it's just for like instructional purposes. Like, I wrote the instructions for you so you don't have to waste time. Teachers are like, copy this long thing of instructions so that it wastes the whole day. How about I typed it, gave it to you, we read it together and discuss what I expect, what kind of sort of behaviors need to happen, because you might need to remind them every time you do a project about the behaviors that need to happen when you're in small groups. Maybe they won't remember the first 80 times you do it, but the next year their teacher will be like, what did you do with them? They are so good. When they're like, you know, but you got it eventually. It takes time. Like I said, it's not, doesn't happen overnight, but if everyone is doing it at all of the levels, it would be amazing. And they do it in other countries. They have far more tools than we do here in America, but that is definitely another discussion.
Right.
So I'm going to go to another incredibly important session that I'm just going to sort of gloss over, but the reason I do is because it sort of should be its own session, because it's extremely important if you're going to be a teacher in Texas, because the highest percent of English language learners that we have is Spanish speakers, right? After that, we have Mandarin, and then so on and so forth, with large populations. So it's not all Spanish speakers, and that's what I try to tell my interns that are from predominantly Spanish-speaking communities, that you will get. I have had people where I do not have any, I will have to look up information about their culture. And I'm talking about, I have been a teacher of people whose language is in English, whose language is an indigenous language and does not have writing. Like, they don't have a written language. So knowing how to use those ELL strategies in order to make a connection with the experience that they have, the prior knowledge, and the word that we're trying to get them to learn so that they can, and it might be a basic word, word like gardening, you know,
Mm-hmm.
or it might be really complex, like mitosis or oxymoron. And English is hard. It's not the easiest
Mm-hmm.
of language. We have a lot of nonsensical rules made by different things. We borrow from a lot of other languages all over the place. Do we borrow? And then, so it is a confusing task. And with our ELL students, like, man, they are brilliant. And I say this because just factually, scientifically, it's true. If you speak more languages, you're using more of your brain, you've made more whatever, and therefore you are smarter. And so whenever I have my ESL students, my ELL students, are when the beginners very shy to practice speaking, even if they do know some English words, because they don't want people to laugh at their accent, or maybe they mispronounced a word, or they said the wrong word. And I always tell, and I get this even with people who come to me for their PPR and Spanish is their second language. Adults will tell me to this day they are embarrassed of the way they talk. And I would say, what are you even saying right now? Do you realize you're smarter than most of the population because you speak two languages? You speak beautifully, perfectly. Don't even worry about it. And practice makes perfect, point blank period. So for our ELL learners, practice makes perfect, and it really is. There's two different sort of skills or proficiencies that we look at in education. You have your BICS, which is your basic language skills. How are you doing today? Do you hate the quarantine? Can we do anything about Trump? Like, just not about academics, but like, do you remember what the process of mitosis was? Like, what the different stages were? Like, that's a different conversation, not BICS. That's CALS, which is cognitive academic language proficiency. How can they speak about those complex ideas, those academic terms? And how are they doing with those things? And what way can we sort of make them understand those better? But the BICS takes, it says, about 2 years. And it does if everybody does what they're supposed to do. And that's making every opportunity to speak to themselves, their peers, to native speakers on the playground, to you when you walk by, ask them questions they didn't answer, maybe guess, play hand charades for a little bit. You are doing those things to get them out of the beginner. So the way that the state sort of allocates for them or judges their proficiency, it's beginner, intermediate, advanced, and advanced high. And so your beginners are not going to know very much English. It's going to be purely Spanish. And we rate them on speaking, listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So if you can't understand the words that I'm saying to you because your listening skills are bad, not that they're bad, you're not listening, but you don't understand what's coming into your ear, then your speaking skills are probably going to be a little bit off. So there's like, we have to scaffold. And for each of those levels, there are particular things that we can do when you're a beginner and you're trying to get better at reading, when you're advanced and you're trying to get better at reading, when you're intermediate and you're trying to get better at writing, and when you're advanced high and you're trying to perfect it. Although I will say advanced high is not, you cannot tell the difference between an advanced high ELL student and a native English speaker. And I would say that their writing is maybe even better because they have to try harder at learning vocabulary. So advanced high students write like AP English students. You'll have a regular English student and you're like, oh my goodness, English is your first language. How dare you give me this paper? You know? We have to find where they are and make sure that we are meeting all of their needs. And a lot of times teachers will gloss over those students that do speak English and not take the time to explain words that they maybe just assume that they understood, and that they don't. And rather than say, I didn't know what you just said, and make everybody look at me and you have to rewind, I'm just gonna pretend like I understood and I didn't understand anything that you just said now because that was important. So our ELL students are beginners. They're not gonna ask for understanding because they don't have English language to ask for understanding. Plus they didn't understand what you said. So we have to always be doing needs assessment, checking to see informal assessments like walking around, having conversations, and making sure that they have an understanding and that there's no fear of saying that there is a lack of understanding, that they understand, no, this is a hard thing that I'm learning and I'm doing wonderful, and so let me just learn this word, and it's just another thing in their bank. So posing it to them that way. We still have the rest of this page, which is communication, and then Bloom's taxonomy. Like I said, some things are old, and actually scholarship here has changed, and synthesis and evaluation. Oh, evaluation, analysis, it goes comprehension, no, knowledge, comprehension, application, evaluation, analysis, and then synthesis. So it's changed. And the reason it's changed is because we now understand that it's harder to synthesize something. Oh, well, that looks like a half full jar of water, you know, that you're evaluating how much is there. But to synthesize something, you had to have evaluated it. Then you had to have analyzed it to see how does it work? What pieces go together to make it work? What is it like? What is it not like? Synthesis, like I'm blowing that apart and creating something totally new based on my experience and the form. And that's much more challenging. So that scholarship has changed, and in all colleges in everywhere, that's different. So if you wanted to schedule another appointment later, we could do the other side, and then I can do the full, like what they use for telpas. It's the instructional training series for the ELLs, how to support them, have them in the classroom. So we'll go over what the state says each of those students looks like. Or do they speak a lot of English? Do they need sort of nonverbal cues in order to give you some sort of response? Is it verbal or nonverbal that they responded back to you? So looking at that and how best to help them individually. And then we can take a look at some questions if you want.
Yeah, I would love to do that.
Okay, cool. Because I know you said you wanted an hour, and I don't know if you have more time, but I sort of scheduled just an hour. So if you wanted to, I'm available next week, and actually this week I'm available too, but whenever, you just let me know.
Okay, I think I take my test on the 13th. So this week.
I always write down, and I light a little candle. I say a little prayer for you.
Yes, please. Yes.
I do. So the 13th, okay. And how are they going to do that? Are they doing less seats?
Yes. So I kept waiting. Texas teachers kept saying, "Oh, they're closed. They're closed." And then so I'm like, like last week, I was like, I'm gonna go see if something's open. I know they're getting ready to open the city up. And then they're like, then I sent an email 2 days later, like, please, try to book your test. And I'm like, I'm so glad I have got my seat. Because I'm like, okay, everything's closed. Everything's closed. So I was worried about that.
Yeah, everything's closed, but TA still wants their stuff done on time.
Yeah. So I felt the pressure coming from that. Like, oh, like, what are we gonna do? What's gonna happen?
Yeah. So May the 13th, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, awesome. So we do have a little room to play with, and I would say like maybe one or two more sessions, and you'll be completely, like, I would say you'll be completely ready. The one where we look at the questions, we'll take a look at those words, but I really just wanted to go over this. Well, that way you know what sort of like pedagogical terms to look for. That way you could go to that filing cabinet and extract to help you answer the question the way the state wants to.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, thank you so much. Could you send me your Cash App name?
Yes, I definitely will. What I'm going to do is I'm going to send you my Cash App name. I'm going to send you this. I'm going to send you the stuff for next week, so you could just take a look at it, and I don't have to
Okay.
Hey, well, let's take a look at this, and so that way you can already start to use it. Now this is old. There are a couple more changes. We'll go over them later, but these things hardly don't change. You know what I mean? Like the theory of moral development is going to be that in the 90s and then later, unless really scholarship change. So this is a really great, I say, like cheat sheet of the pedagogical expectations or terms that we should know, like sort of things that we should do.
Right. Okie dokie.
Okay, well, you have a beautiful rest of your day.
Thank you so much. You too.
Okay, bye-bye.